Semiramis, aka Ashtaroth, aka Astarte, those are some of her names, erected the evergreen tree as a symbol of the everlasting fertility of Nimrod slash Baal. And in Judges 3:7, the Bible calls this the worship of Baal, and the Asherahs slash Asherim, which is the plural version of that in the ancient Hebrew, or in some of these other translations of the Bible, you may see it groves, which were sacred trees. So it says, so the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and Asherahs. And that word Asherahs came up 40 times in the Old Testament, and it was to signify the worship of Ashtaroth, the Babylonian slash Canaanite female deity who was the consort of Baal. 1 Kings 14:23, for they also built for themselves high places, sacred pillars, those are the obelisks, and wooden images on every high hill and under every green tree. Deuteronomy 12:2-4, you shall utterly destroy all the places where the nations which you shall dispossess served their gods, on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. And you shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, and burn their wooden images with fire. You shall cut down the carved images of their gods and destroy their names from that place. You shall not worship the Lord your God with such things. Deuteronomy 16:21-22. You shall not plant for yourself any tree as a wooden image near the altar which you build yourself to the Lord your God. You shall not set up a sacred pillar, again an obelisk, which the Lord your God hates. Exodus 34:13. But you shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, and cut down their wooden images. 2 Kings 23:7. Then he tore down the ritual booths of the perverted persons that were in the house of the Lord, where the woman wove hangings for the wooden image. And I already mentioned Jeremiah 10 in the last video, so if you want to look that up, just remember, read Jeremiah 10:1-5. That one is the one that most people use when they talk about the Christmas tree. But hopefully, again, you're connecting the dots. Let's get back to Semiramis, though, because she claimed that on December 25th, a full-sized evergreen tree sprang up from a dead stump to symbolize the rebirth of Nimrod every year. And she also claimed that he ascended into the heavens and his spirit merged with the sun. So from then on, as the sun, Nimrod would ride his chariots across the sky, just like Santa Claus rides his little chariot with all his reindeer. And then she was later impregnated by the sun to give birth to Tammuz, who is the reincarnated Nimrod, who she then married. This is like Osiris being reincarnated in Horus. And yeah, she married her son and they ruled the empire. Now, back to the story of Babel. If you guys don't remember that story, this was Nimrod's attempt to ascend into heaven and take God's throne, at which time God killed those plans. He scattered everyone across the earth and he confused their languages, which is the reason why we see so many different names for the same people. So this is why we see different names around the world for the same person. You got Isis and Tammuz, which are from Babylon. You have Leda and Apollo, which is the mother of Apollo in Greece. You have Demeter and Dionysus, who was the mother of Dionysus. She's also in Greece. You have Mithra from Persia. You have Mithras in Rome. You have Mitra in India. You have Ra in Egypt. Now, you tell me, if you are a discerning Christian and you know the attributes of Satan and you know that he knows the Bible in every prophetic text forwards and backwards, do you think he's going to try to poison the well and cause confusion? Absolutely he is. And this is why all these things happen. This is why so many people who don't believe think that Jesus is just another story for all of these stories that were fabricated. So the names change, but the worship is the same. And it's just the same with Moloch. We have Moloch, the ancient Moabite god, who to this day, anybody who's followed in the last year and has woken up to the child sacrifice and the pedophilia stuff going on, Satanists worship and sacrifice children to Moloch. And what it would be back in the day, the parent would bring their screaming child in the lap of this dead god statue, and the parents would tell Moloch what they wished for as they sacrificed their child to it. And it kind of makes you think of this whole sit on Santa's lap thing differently, doesn't it? Right? Because if we are seeing that it's just another analog for Moloch and these other gods, it's no wonder that children, it's almost always that they scream when they first meet him until they're like programmed after a few years. And, you know, after those years of trauma, they coalesce and they do it joyfully. They sit on the lap, they tell them what they want. And it's just sick. And I'm really sorry to bring this up. It's sickening to even talk about, but I just had to make this point. So, of course, we have this modern day Santa God who's no different, right? He's immortal. He grants your wishes. He knows when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good. He rewards the good kids and he gives the bad kids coal, which obviously has an eerie similarity to a burnt offering to Moloch. He flies on a magical chariot just like Mithra and Odin. And I'm going to come back to the evil of Santa in the last video because it's so deep. It affects everything. To lie to a child and tell them that Santa exists. But I'll leave that for the last video. Now, let's go back around the world and look at all the other different pagan Christmas traditions. So we have Yule, which is the Scandinavian midwinter festival. It's a symbol of fertility. And it looks like they borrowed the name Yule from the ancient Chaldeans because Yule actually means baby in the Chaldean language, and it symbolizes Tammuz. The Scandinavians, on the other hand, they worship Thor and Odin and Frey or Frigg. The Yule log, you may have heard that, the Yule log, a lot of the time it has a human figure chalked on it to represent a sacrifice. And the Yule log also symbolizes the rebirth of the sun from the fire. And this is the actual significance of the Christmas tree. So we have the Yule log and the Christmas tree, all the things that I told you about the Christmas tree. This is the actual significance. And now we have people who sing carols like Deck the Halls with Boughs of Holly, which is branches of holly, or O Christmas Tree, which comes from the Germanic song O Tannenbaum, which is literally a praise and worship song to the everlasting tree of life and a symbol of their worship to Thor and Odin, the Germanic versions of all the other names that I've already mentioned. And just like with the Hindus, the Mithra worshippers, the Wiccans, and every other pagan religion, they make altars at the base of their trees. And Christians, they have no idea why. They definitely have no scriptural defense of why they use Christmas trees, but the Kabbalists worship the tree of life as well, which is just another representation of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it's decorated with balls that look like fruit. And at the top, we either see a star that represents Venus, or even a disc representing the sun, or the angel, which is usually female, which again symbolizes Semiramis or Ashtaroth, Astarte, Ishtar. You get it. It's all these names that I've mentioned. Now, the Assyrians decorated their trees with pine cones, and then they put Asher on top, who's also known as Mithra, and it's just another representation of the sun deity. Now, the Christmas lights, you know, the ancient Norse kept bonfires blazing during the Yule season, and the Romans, they fastened candles to trees during Saturnalia, which I mentioned before, as symbols of the sun's return to earth. And throughout that celebration, they also kept lamps burning in their homes to ward off evil spirits and candles burning in their windows to call back the sun. And let's not forget what the Emperor Nero did to Christians in the first century. And I'm not going to get into detail with that because it's disgusting, but let's just say that the word Roman candle used to mean something much darker. And I don't think I mentioned the Feast of Fools, and I think another one called the Upside Down Feast. But basically what they did during Saturnalia is they would select this person who was usually kind of like a fool, and they made that person king for like several days, and he would have whatever he wanted. He would have all the drinking and drugs and sex and whatever he wanted, and then at the end of that, he was expected to kill himself as a sacrifice. And just like that, the Boar of Atonement in Yule, this is, you know, a sacrificial boar. So people would swear oaths on the boar and they would make divination with it. So they would try to predict their future or wish themselves luck for the future, while after they sacrificed it to the god Frey. And to this day, Cubans and Latin Americans still eat a pig on Nochebuena or Christmas Eve, which I always used to do. I used to always love that. That's a whole different story, the pig situation, the pig subject. But about the pig sacrifice, and again, this is like as I learn these things, I'm just like, there's a reason why God doesn't want us to do certain things. But with this pig sacrifice, let's bring back Antiochus Epiphanes, who, if you remember, I mentioned him in the timeline, and Daniel 11:31 says, "And forces," this is a prophecy that Daniel mentions, "and forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. Then they shall take away the daily sacrifices and place there the abomination of desolation." And now I'm going to read to you a passage from Josephus. He's a Jewish historian, in his book, The Antiquities of the Jews. "Now it came to pass after 2 years, in the 145th year, on the 25th day of that month, December, which is called Casleu, and by the Macedonians Apelles, in the 153rd Olympiad, 17, that the king came up to Jerusalem, and pretending peace, he got possession of the city by treachery, at which time he spared not so much as those that admitted him into it, on account of the riches that lay in the temple." So I'll put this whole thing to read, but he basically empties the temple, kills everyone who lets him into the city, and he did not abstain from even the veils. He took everything, even the curtains, which were made of fine linens and scarlet. He also emptied it of its secret treasures and left nothing at all remaining, and by this means cast the Jews into a great lamentation, for he forbade them to offer those daily sacrifices which they used to offer to God according to the law. And when he had pillaged the whole city, some of the inhabitants he slew, and some he carried captive, together with their wives and children, so that the multitude of those captives that were taken alive amounted to about 10,000. He also burnt down the finest buildings, and when he had overthrown the city walls, he built a citadel in the lower part of the city, for the place was high and overlooked the temple, on which account he fortified it with high walls and towers, and put into it a garrison of Macedonians. However, in that citadel dwelt the impious and wicked part of the Jewish multitude. These were the co-conspirators who worshiped the same gods as him, from whom it proved that the citizens suffered many and sore calamities. So these people were helping him to slay their own people. And when the king had built an idol altar upon God's altar, so he put an idol to Jupiter, which is also Satan, he slew swine upon it. So he sacrificed a pig on God's altar, and so offered a sacrifice neither according to the law nor the Jewish religious worship in that country. He also compelled them to forsake the worship which they paid their own God. So he didn't let them worship God, and to adore those whom he took to be gods, and made them temples and raised idol altars in every city and village. So he made these people build all of these idols that were not godly idols, and raise idol altars in every city and village, and offer swine upon them every day. He also commanded them not to circumcise their sons, and threatened to punish any that should be found to have transgressed his injunction. He also appointed overseers who should compel them to do what he commanded. And indeed many of the Jews there were who complied with the king's commands, either voluntarily or out of fear of the penalty that was denounced. But the best men, and I gotta highlight this, but the best men and those of the noblest souls did not regard him, but did pay a greater respect to the customs of their country than concern as to the punishment which he threatened to the disobedient, on which account they every day underwent great miseries and bitter torments, for they were whipped with rods, and their bodies were torn to pieces, and were crucified while they were still alive and breathed. They also strangled those women and their sons whom they had circumcised as the king had appointed, hanging their sons about their necks as they were upon the crosses. And if there were any sacred book or the law found, it was destroyed, and those with whom they were found miserably perished also. So Antiochus, guys, if you don't know, Antiochus was the Antichrist who committed the abomination of desolation. Guess when? On December 25th, how I mentioned. And he was the king of the north from Daniel's prophecy, who desecrated the temple in the name of Zeus/Jupiter, aka Satan. But I also believe that this prophecy in Daniel also refers to the future king of the north, who will be the final Antichrist. Because if you guys don't see the parallels, you got to be crazy. It's like he didn't let them worship their gods. It sounds like, he made people take the mark of the beast. But if you noticed, A lot of them did, but those who didn't were tormented. And if you are a Christian, do not take the mark of the beast or anything that looks even close to the mark of the beast. And I don't even want to get into that, but I mean, if you guys don't know what that could possibly be right now in the times we live in, I don't know. You guys, you got to wake up. But some more Christian symbols. I'm already at 36 minutes. Oh my goodness. Some more Christian symbols here. Elves. So first of all, they're easily distinguishable by their Phrygian caps, and they were teachers of the dark arts. And I believe these creatures, I think I mentioned this, I believe these creatures to be a specific form or bloodline of the Nephilim, which I mentioned in previous videos. And here are a few of my reasons why. So the dictionary definitions of elves. First, let's go to the Webster's Dictionary. Defines elf: 1, a small, often mischievous fairy; 2, a small, lively creature, also usually a lively, mischievous, or malicious person. Other names for elves are brownies, dwarves, fairy, gnome, goblin, gremlin, hobgoblin, kobold, leprechaun, pixie, puck, sprite, troll. And why are they associated with Christmas? They began to be associated with Christmas in the United States in the 19th century following the publications of such works as Clement Clarke Moore 1823 poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, which described the titular figure as a right jolly old elf. And the original word is very old. It's been with us not only in modern English, but in the Middle and Old English, as well. In Old English, it was elf, dating in use from before the 12th century. Elf has similarities to a number of related words in other languages, such as the Middle Old German Alf, which is an incubus, which is, I mentioned incubus and succubus in the last video, and the Old Norse Alfr, which is elf. The other definition of elf: 1, a wandering spirit, a fairy, a hobgoblin, an imaginary being, which our rude ancestors, it just means, I guess it's another word for our more primitive ancestors, supposed to inhabit unfrequented places and in various ways to affect mankind. 2, an evil spirit, a devil. Now, H.P. Blavatsky, Helena Blavatsky, she is a Satanist. She calls herself a Theosophist. A lot of the Kabbalists, a lot of the Masons follow her work. She says, under the general designation of fairies and fays, these spirits of the elements, remember what I mentioned last time with elements, appear in the myths, fables, traditions, or poetry of all nations, ancient and modern. Their names are legion: Paris, Devs, Jinn, which is the Asian version of these elemental spirits, Sylvans, Satyrs, Fauns, Elves, Dwarves, Trolls, you get it, and many more. These elementals are the principal agents of disembodied but never visible shells taken for spirits at seances, and are, as shown above, the producers of all the phenomena except the subjective. In the course of this article, we will adopt the term elemental to designate only these nature spirits, attaching it to no other spirit or monad that has been embodied in human form. Elementals, as said already, have no form, and in trying to describe what they are, it is better to say that they are centers of force, having instinctive desires, but no consciousness as we understand it. Hence, their acts may be good or bad indifferently. And it says this class is believed to possess but one of the 3 chief attributes of man. They have neither immortal spirits nor tangible bodies, only astral forms which partake to a distinguishing degree of the element to which they belong, and also of the ether. Now, one of the, I guess the most famous elf is, of course, Santa Claus. He's always shown wearing his Phrygian cap. And another interesting thing, where going back to Santa, we call him Old Saint Nick. And what are the odds that Saint Nicholas, who's the Vatican Church, the Vatican in Rome says that was never a bishop, the devil is called Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and in popular rustic speech is called Old Nick. That's from the Oxford English Dictionary. And the Concise Dictionary of English Etymology, Nick is known as the devil. And if you remember, Nikolaos, this is a Greek word, and it comes from what Revelation 2 calls from the Nicolaitans, who adhere to the teachings of the Nicolaitans, which were, of course, satanic pagan religions. Now, there's a book that came out, I believe, in the 18th century called Robin Goodfellow. And Robin itself was a medieval nickname for the devil. And Robin's trademark laugh is, guess what? What's his laugh, guys? Ho, ho, ho. And this is just crazy. So the other thing, I want to just go back real quick about Santa Claus, aka Sinterklaas. This whole belief that Santa comes down through the chimney developed from an Old Norse legend. The Norse believed that the goddess Hertha appeared in the fireplace and brought good luck to the home. So Sinterklaas was originally accompanied by the Krampus, and in some traditional towns that are still connected to the old world, we still see them together. I'm putting a whole bunch of disturbing pictures showing you now of Santa with Krampus. And the old myths say that St. Nicholas captured Satan, aka Beelzebub, or Zwartpeit, or Black Peter, aka Krampus. But in some cases, Krampus, the only thing that remained was the actual Satan. So the actual jolly old elf is gone, and all we see is Satan. But then, of course, in most cases, and most of the world, they've adopted the whole jolly, happy Santa that we see today, of course. And I honestly, this is just one of the longest running and most successful PR campaigns that I've ever seen executed. We already spoke about the wreath, and then two more quick references, because this is getting long. The holly, we know that's used in magic for thousands of years. And going back to Saturnalia, we know that Saturn was the god of agriculture, and he was associated with the color red, holly, and mistletoe, which both of them are grown in the depth of the winter and are a sign of fertility, because if you crush the berries of mistletoe, it actually resembles human semen. Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you guys, I told you it was gonna get dark. And that's why when we kiss a girl under the mistletoe, the occult meaning of that has to do with sex and procreation and fertility. Mistletoe is a parasite that didn't grow on earth, it grew on the tree. And the Druids, who I mentioned last time, the Galatians, from the ancient times, they used them in their rituals. And I mentioned the Feast of Fools, the world upside down. So guys, if by now you can't say with complete certainty that this is a completely pagan holiday, I don't know what else to give you. I mean, I've given every single historical reference that I can find, and this is literally in just 40 hours of research. You know, I'm sure there's way more to look into, but from a biblical standpoint, from a pagan historical standpoint, there's absolutely nothing good about it. And it felt dark, you know, researching this stuff. I lost sleep. It felt really dark. But, you know, in the fourth video, I'm just going to wrap things up. I'm going to talk about, you know, just give my final thoughts. And then I'm going to talk about what the Bible tells us we should be celebrating instead of these traditions of men. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely share the whole series with anybody who you want to just make aware of this, you know, and, you know, pray for discernment. Read your Bible. Don't take my word for it. Look at every single reference that I mentioned. I put the references on the screen. Look into them for yourself, guys. Don't trust me. And like I said, pray for discernment. But I think it's pretty obvious at this point that this is just another one of Satan's biggest deceptions that has become widely accepted because of how sick our culture is and how far we've gotten from God. So I will see you guys on the fourth video.